everybody, it's Jenny from the Missouri Star Quilt Company, and I've got a great project for you. Let's take a look at this quilt behind me. Isn't this fun? Now all these little squares, this looks like a lot of work, but I've got a method to show you today that you're gonna just love, and it's gonna kind of rock your world because it's gonna teach you a whole new way of sewing. So to make this quilt, what you're gonna need is one roll of 2.5-inch strips, and we've used Lilla by Lotta Jonsdottir for Wyndham Fabrics. You're also going to need 2 yards of your dark fabric. Now that dark fabric is gonna take care of these pieces, that inner border, and the binding. The 2 yards does all that. This outer border here, this is a little 5-inch border, and you're gonna need 1 yard of fabric for your outer border. So that's all you need to make this, and I love the name Lilla for this little fabric line because Lilla means little, and my mom is Swedish, and as a little girl she always called me Lilla Vännen, which is little friend, and it's just kind of sentimental for me. It's really sweet. So let me show you how to make this. What you're going to do is you're going to unpack your roll of strips, and you're going to sew 4 of those together. Now this is just straight 1/4-inch seaming, and we're going to iron all our seams going one direction, and you're just going to sew 4 of them together. You can sew up one side and down the other, whatever you like. Then you're going to cut a 2.5-inch strip out of your background, and you're going to add that to the top right here. So we're just going to put this strip on here. We're going to sew 1/4 of an inch all the way down, and I'm going to go to the sewing machine and do that. Since I've already got my my 4 others sewn together, and what this should make is 5 strips total. So let's just go ahead and sew this down. Alrighty, you want to sew 1/4 of an inch right down the side, and you want to make sure those 1/4 of an inches or your seams are pretty consistent. So what we're going to do now is we're going to press this open, and I'm just going to roll this back like this and give it a good press. And go all the way along the side. You want to make sure your top is nice and flat. Seams all going the same direction. I'm going to flip this over and look at my seams, and they look pretty good. Little bit of a little rumple right here, and we're just going to press those down. So your back should look like this, where all your seams are going one direction. And now comes the secret for what we're doing. What we're going to do now is we're going to fold this up and sew this together in a tube. So we're going to go right over to our sewing machine and sew this together just like this. All right, keep them lined up and don't stretch them. Now for some of you, it might work easier if you make sure and trim off one end before you start sewing your tube together. Because if you trim off one end, not all of our pieces line up exactly the same. And so if you trim off an end like this, then when you go to fold them together, you'll be able to match this. Because if you get this off, like down here, if I had pulled this over to here, my strip set would not lay flat, and you want this to lay nice and flat. So now we've got this nice and flat strip set here. We're not going to worry about ironing that middle. We've just sewn it together in a tube. And we're going to come across here, and we're going to cut 2.5-inch strips. And we're going to cut our whole strip set up just like this. To make each block, you're going to need 5 of these. So that's another thing to remember. However many strips you have sewn together this way, That's how many you need to make a block. So we've got 5 strips sewn together. We're going to cut 5 of these to make a block. All right, I'll cut one more. All right, so once you get all your strips cut, I like to put my blocks together from the same strip set, but you can actually scrap these up and it'll work just the same. All right, so now what we've got these little strip sets. Now you're going to get out that handy seam ripper. We don't use one of these very often, but what we're going to do is we're going to go to our dark piece right here. So here's our navy. We're going to go to that dark piece and we're going to take out that seam. And what I do when I take these out is I just loosen up about every 5 stitches. And a lot of times, like on this one, the whole thing is just pulling out from the side. So 4 little pokes with your seam ripper and you should be able to pretty much just pull that apart. So here's our piece. That was our first one. We took it out at the top of the blue. We're going to hold on to the black. We're going to count 1 back the blue, and we're going to take it out between the blue and that stripy one. And again, I'm just going to poke 4 little stitches out here. These are really pretty easy to take out. Now, let me just say on that, don't sew your stitches so tiny that it's hard to take out. It's got to be small enough to hold it together and big enough to rip. That's what I always say. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to line this one up and see how they're starting to cascade. So now we've gone to the blue, we're going to go, or the navy, we're going to go to the blue and then to the gray and take it out on the next one. All right, and then see how this is working? All right, so we've got the blue, the gray, the yellow, and we take it out. Oh, this one's upside down. I looked at that, I was like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, I did that wrong. All right, so now we got the blue, the gray, and the yellow. And you just take it out 1 square down, 1 square down, 1 square down, and then it'll cascade like that automatically. Now the whole world has seen me use a seam ripper. All right, so there's that. And then we go right back around here to where we're at the navy and we're taking it out with the gray little petals like this. And there we are. Now these get sewn together 2.5. You're going to want to go ahead and iron these so these are nice and flat because we had them in a tube. So, I mean, it's just going to lay together easier if they're ironed. So I'm just going to press these and press them. Now also, if you start to put these together and your seams, you can't nest them on the back or you twist one seam to nest to the other seam, don't worry about that. This is going to lay nice and flat. All right, so here we've got our block. We're going to keep it in order. We're going to put this on top of here. We're going to feel to nest these seams. You want to make sure that these little edges stay together, and we're just going to sew 1/4 inch right down the side. And we're going to do this to all of our strips. And it is a little bit of matching, but you'll get pretty good at it. You know, you may be a little nervous about it on the first one, but by the time you've sewn, you know, a bunch of these together, you are going to be a pro. All right, let's see how I did on these two. Because I like to iron between each little junction too, it kind of sets your seams up for the next one. So if these are laying a different way or whatever, mine are a little bit cattywampus, I don't really worry about that because I know nobody's going to look inside my quilt. Nobody's going to peek inside there and see what's happening. All right, so this next one, we're going to do the same thing on. We're going to make the whole block that way. When we get all those together, we get a block that looks like this. How cool is that? And it really does come together much easier than you think. And then you get to set them together. Now there's lots of ways to set these together. And the way we did it was so that our dark squares came together in the middle to form sort of a 4-patch. Like this. Let's look at this quilt behind me. So see right here how these come together? These? This is 4 blocks right here that come together on these edges to make a 4 patch. And so then you're just sewing them together, and again you're just going to match up and nest up your seams just like this, so that as you sew them together they all line up perfectly straight and you catch those seams. So just make sure that you're lining them up. And I actually have 2 blocks that match here. When I put the quilt together, I probably would not do that. Just because it shows less, it hides that, it helps you hide that a little more in case you're not perfect. Let me iron these apart. All right, so here's our first 2 like this. So you can see, you know, they look pretty good, and we're just going to do that. And I just made, when I laid mine out, I put them on the design wall, and I just made the color kind of flow through, looked at what I was doing. Each one of these blocks is from a different strip set that we've sewn together, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks by 6 down. So you're going to make a total of 30 blocks. Now that leaves a little bit left over on the end of your strip. You have, you know, you can get a few more pieces out there, but not enough to make a single square. So what I did was I took some of those leftover pieces and I put them together in squares. So you could see that this whole thing is scrappy. So you don't have necessarily 2 colors that follow each other down through the whole block. But you still get the gist of the design because you've picked a standout solid fabric that's really going to show your design as you put these together. So you can use those. I'm probably going to use these in a separate little project like a table runner or something like that, because I like the symmetry of all of my blocks, of seeing the squares cascade down. Now a couple more things about this. You change the number of strips and you get bigger blocks. You're gonna, again, remember however many strips you're sewing in long. If you sew 5, you're gonna cut 5 to make a block. So this is just a fun, great way to put them together, because you just sew them in a tube and take them apart at every, you know, just cascading seams down so that it comes out. Now, I have to admit to you also that when I started picking these apart first, I made some mistakes. You know, I got it and I'm like, wait, it doesn't fit anywhere. And so it's just so easy. You just sew the seam right back together and then take it apart where you're supposed to take it apart. You know, don't stress about that, because I did not do it perfect the first time either, because I'm a little challenged that way. So this is a great project, an easy way to put this kind of a cascading strip set together. And we hope you enjoyed this tutorial on the Crossing Paths quilt from the Missouri Star Quilt Company.